Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And as you can see, I am on the road for today's episode. And hopefully, we'll be just as good as in home territory. And this is an episode that I think is a little more open, a little more free to have a conversation. I'm sitting in my in-laws' back den in front of all of my father-in-law's car books, so you can tell that I'm definitely not home because I don't know a thing about cars. But there's also no huge headline for today, so I've got a couple of interesting Aaron Jones comments about JJ McCarthy, and then the NFL released something that's kind of fascinating. It's called NFL IQ, and it tries to predict the top targets of each NFL team based on their needs, and I assume based on mock drafts as well. So we'll take a look at who NFL IQ, which was created by the NFL, thinks that the Minnesota Vikings are most likely to draft. But this is a show, as always, for you guys. And ask me anything Vikings you want, anything NFL, just the food opinions I'm not very good at. So anything else other than that, feel free to throw it out there. We'll have a fun discussion. Also, intern Clay is standing by as well, and he's got some other things to discuss, including Garrett Bradbury's first comments as a New England Patriot, which I wouldn't have thought he would have said anything that would surprise me or interest me, and yet he did. So we're going to take a look at that, along with Clay's put together some would you rather have this guy or that guy in the draft, so we can have some fun debates there. But throw your questions, your comments into the comment section, and we will fire up some fun football conversation. Jason thought I was at the Masters. No, I would be whispering if I was at the Masters. Instead, I'm in my in-laws' back den screaming. And the windows are open, so maybe the neighbors are going to think, why is someone yelling about the Minnesota Vikings? But maybe they'll enjoy the show as well. So no, not me at the Masters. Although I will say, former intern Paul Hodowanik is actually covering the Masters for PGAtour.com this week. I'm very proud of former intern Paul, and you can go follow him on social media to see his coverage. But how cool is that? Former intern of mine that I drafted and developed, if you will, turning into a guy who's covering the Masters. So there's a lot of pressure on intern Clay to step up his game. I have let him know that today he's really got to prove himself because the other interns are kind of crushing it. So let's get to the Aaron Jones comments right away here on the show. And again, throw those questions and comments into the chat, and I will jump on those right after I run through these. So Aaron Jones was on Good Morning Football, and of course, he was asked about his new quarterback, JJ McCarthy. He said, quote, "He's different here," he said, pointing to his head. And thank you to Jonathan Harrison, producer of this show, who transcribed the comments on Bring Me the News, their website. But, different here, assuming mentally. He's a competitor. He wants to be great, and he's hungry. I think you'll see it when he steps onto the field. So that was interesting. And he also said, JJ is a winner. You look at him from high school through his time in college. He's lost one career game, which is really crazy to think about. He came in a short time with the Vikings last year, and he was balling. Now, the way that I look at compliments from teammates is, of course, teammates are always going to give compliments to their quarterback, and they're always going to say nice things about each other because what sense would it make for Aaron Jones to go on Good Morning Football? He's way too good of a teammate to be like, man, I don't know. I'm worried. Of course, he's not going to do that. If he does, that would be a huge headline. It would be crazy. Aaron Jones is one of the most positive people that I've ever been around. It's almost like if you took Kevin O'Connell and made him into a running back, is how everlastingly positive Aaron Jones is as a person. But these comments did make me think of two different things. Number one is, oh yeah, JJ McCarthy still has Aaron Jones. And when we talk about the leadership element for McCarthy and making this team his, I think it's really beneficial that he has a player like Aaron Jones, because everything you've ever heard about Jones is true when it comes to his locker room presence, what he's like to be around. People care about him so much. I think he has a really great understanding of people and what they're going through, what they're feeling, how to put them in the right place. And that positive attitude, I think, is also really helpful. And it's somebody who's been through just about everything in the NFL. Aaron Jones has been through close playoff losses. He's been through tough seasons, ups and downs, and knows how to navigate all that stuff. And he did so with one of the great quarterbacks in NFL history when he was with Green Bay. So this was a reminder of, yeah, that's right. JJ McCarthy's not doing this thing alone. And I think the Aaron Jones re-signing, we can look at the price and the dollar figure and go, man, I don't know. Like, is that risky to bring back Aaron Jones after he just carried the ball more times than he's ever touched the ball before in his history in the NFL? Is that going to be something that is like good for the regression possibility, the injury possibility with a running back in his 30s and all those things? And I look at it as some of the value is that he's still a good player. And we saw it last year. And with Jordan Mason there, Aaron Jones, I think, could be a very good player if he's carrying the ball maybe 150 times as opposed to 250 times, and very much worth the money if he's doing it. The other part is he is such a good receiver out of the backfield that this is one that we have not talked about as being a very important signing in the offseason. And this reminded me, right, no, it was, because the check down option for a young quarterback, I think, is really important and valuable. And Aaron Jones is one of the best receiving running backs over the last decade in the NFL. But it also made me think about his character and his leadership and his experience and how important it is for a young quarterback. Like, think about the young quarterbacks who have succeeded in the NFL recently. And Brock Purdy might be the best one to compare to this situation with JJ McCarthy, because how many times could we say that the quarterback came in with this kind of coaching, this kind of wide receivers, and even potentially this kind of running game? I'm going to leave that at potential. I'm not going to quite get to comparing KOC's run game to Kyle Shanahan yet. But what Brock Purdy had was not just a lot of talent, but also a lot of veteran leadership around him. He did not have to put the entire franchise on his back. So somebody like Joe Burrow, when he came into the league, he had talent, but he didn't have a whole lot of leadership there. Young wide receivers, players who hadn't had much success in the past, and he had to make that team entirely his. Now, he was able to do that, but the Vikings are not asking JJ McCarthy to do that with players like Aaron Jones, who can still be leaders. So this was a reminder that he has a lot of players to help him out. Brian O'Neill is also a part of that. Justin Jefferson, who has really become a leader over the last couple of years, once he got the contract, especially. I mean, I think he's taken another step as a leader, and we saw that from Justin Jefferson last year. And I don't think there's too many guys who carry themselves more professionally at that position, wide receiver, around the league than Justin Jefferson. But having that infrastructure is really important. But about these quotes, I was looking at the actual wording and what he focused on, because the question from a Good Morning Football, it's a fun show. It's kind of light. Like, they're not grilling him. They're not going to be like, Aaron, what do you think of your, right? You're not going to do that. It's a Good Morning Football. So the question is kind of open-ended. Take it wherever you want. What do you think of JJ McCarthy? And the place that he took it was immediately to the character makeup of McCarthy and what he observed right away. And what I look for in compliments is, are they specific? So if you hear somebody give a compliment, and this isn't always 100% correlation, but think about it this way. Half of my job, if not more, is picking apart player quotes and trying to figure out what they mean. So I'm trying to make this maybe more science than it needs to be, but just, follow with me here. When you ask somebody about somebody they're not really sold on, they might go, yeah, well, he's putting in the work, or something, something like that. Like, well, he's a young player. He's got to figure it out. But what, something hedging a little bit on, I'm not going to go crazy complimenting this person. But in this case, he really focused specifically on, he's a competitor. He wants to be great. He's hungry. And you're going to see it when he steps on the field. And then talking about knowing his past history as a winner and saying that he was balling when, he was playing before. I think when the quotes match up with what we think, then we start to become more confident in them. At least I do. When I'm standing on the sideline at training camp watching JJ McCarthy, and I'm immediately thinking, he's a competitor because I liked watching him in those 2-minute drills and just how focused he was. And even when he made mistakes, you saw him bounce back from those mistakes, but how competitive, how he was able to get guys, I think, rallied behind him, his natural personality. He's got a big personality, and you could really see it. And so for him to say, like, he's different mentally, he's a competitor, he's hungry, like, these are all things that Aaron Jones observed about JJ McCarthy. So he didn't try to avoid or go around the question. He went straight for, this is what I saw last year. And I think it matches up very much with the things that we already know about JJ McCarthy. So when it comes to the questions that we have about McCarthy, we can talk about, well, how accurate is he going to be right away? He's got to relearn all of that footwork after the injury during this offseason. Plus, the game's moving way faster in the regular season than it is in those preseason matchups with the Las Vegas Raiders. So how's he going to adjust to the speed? How's he going to adjust to real pressure, getting hit by the real best edge rushers in the league, of which he's going to play about 10 of them this year? Aiden Hutchinson is on that list a couple of times. There's a lot of guys he's going to face that are going to be really tough. So those questions have to answer themselves when he arrives in the NFL and actually starts to play games. But I think that why it's different from a rookie quarterback is that there have been questions that have already been answered throughout last offseason. And Aaron Jones is kind of confirming the things we've heard from Kevin O'Connell, the things that I've talked about on the show that we saw from interviewing JJ McCarthy and talking with him and watching him practice and go about his business, is that competitive nature of his, how hungry he is to be a winner, his past history, I think it all matters. And we will never know until he's punched in the mouth and how he's going to bounce back from real adversity, which the NFL will throw at you. But the fact that he has people like Aaron Jones on his side, everything to me is a percentage. What percentage chance is it that he becomes the most accurate quarterback in the NFL? Probably not that high based on what we saw in college. But what percentage chance is there that if his teammates that are the veterans believe in JJ McCarthy, no matter his age or lack of experience, that they can guide him along on this journey through his first year with a lot of pressure and a lot of pressure to win, then you've got a serious chance to overcome whatever rookie bumps along the way there's going to be. And Aaron Jones talking about JJ McCarthy in this way was just a reminder for me of, oh yeah, he's got a lot other than KOC. KOC gets a lot of the attention. He's got the quarterback whisperer, but the quarterback whisperer is no fool when it comes to the roster. And I think he whispered Aaron Jones back onto the roster to make sure that not only did he have the playbook, the receivers, but also a very important veteran like Aaron Jones to go with JJ McCarthy. So there's thing number one, headline number one that I wanted to get to, and continue throwing in questions, comments, thoughts. Very interested in what's on your mind as we are marching toward the NFL draft, and would love to have a good conversation with all you guys about whatever's on your mind this evening. But I want to show you the list. So the NFL released this thing called NFL IQ. It has all their analysts and their thoughts on each team, the Eric Edholms and everybody else there at NFL.com, who they've got mocked to different teams. And then it lists the most likely targets based on mock drafts and percentage chances that they see each team. They did all 32 teams and who they're going to draft. So here is NFL IQ's top 5 players that they think the Vikings could draft. Number 1 is Kenneth Grant, which is interesting to me because a lot of the mocks that I've seen have Kenneth Grant already off the board. And if he's there, I really like the idea because I think there's pass rush upside. When I first thought about Kenneth Grant, I went, I don't know. Yeah, big fat guy. Like, that's great. No one loves fat guys more than me. That defensive tackle, that nose tackle, I know how important it is in a 3-4 rooted system. We've seen that over the years with different Belichick teams, the Alan Branches, the Danny Sheltons. But normally, do you have to draft that guy in the first round? Probably not. You can get a Jonathan Bullard, for example, just about anywhere. But then when I took a closer look at Kenneth Grant, when I watched a little bit of him and looked a little closer at the numbers, you actually see pass rush potential. And the fact is that there have been a handful of guys throughout the league. Derek Brown is one of them. Dexter Lawrence is the best example. Vita Vea is another one where Delvin Tomlinson also falls under this category of, would you draft Delvin Tomlinson with the 24th pick? I think you would if you could get 30 to 40 pressures out of that guy, along with top-notch run stuffing in the middle. And then if there is more potential there of 5 to 10 sacks a year, along with 40 pressures or even more. I mean, this guy has movement skills that you just rarely see in the NFL at 330 pounds. And I compared him to Vince Wilfork the other day. It's kind of that same type of guy because he's not the tallest. I would do it if it's that level of player with that kind of upside. You can't expect it right away, but he could contribute right away in run stuffing downs. And look, the league is running a lot. Look at who they're going to play next year. The Vikings are going to play Philly. They're going to play Washington, the running quarterback, but they run the ball a lot. They're going to play Baltimore. You got to stop Baltimore. They're going to play Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't even have a quarterback. What do you think they're doing? Running? I mean, even the Packers, the Lions, these teams run a lot. So not crazy to get Kenneth Grant. Jahdae Barron, the cornerback from Texas, I've talked about him a lot. And here's another interesting piece of information that I ran across today. So I'm working on over at purpleinsider.football, which is the newsletter, working on the thing I put out each year, which is a draft guide of 30 players that I think could be Vikings targets, and then a bunch of other guys that are interesting to me and some stats on them, some why they might fit the Vikings, things like that. And I was looking at last year's consensus draft board and trying to figure out who could be the person that dropped. Someone for the Friday mailbag asked me over there, who could drop that's projected as someone the Vikings can't get their hands on. And last year, Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, the two corners that were drafted in the later part of the first round, both of those guys were consensus mock draft top 15 to 17 players. And the same thing goes for Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson for this year. So Barron is number 2 on their list because I think some people believe he might be the one who drops. He doesn't have the longest arms, which I mean, oh no, what are you going to do? But some might see him as more of a nickel corner. And there also might be an element of, if you're not a Travis Hunter caliber prospect, they're going to take offensive tackles, edge rushers, where there's more desperation to get your hands on those guys first, and the corners might come second. And if that's the case, then Barron has a good chance to drop to 24. Derek Harmon is the next guy on the list. I mean, we've been talking about Derek Harmon since the Combine. When we heard that the Vikings met with Harmon, he just makes so much sense. So I'm not surprised that he would be in there. He's a Jonathan Allen type of player, can do it all. He could line up in the 5 tech if you want to get very football-y. He can line up inside. So Derek Harmon, tons of pressures last year, 6'5", 300 plus pounds. He's kind of got it all. Nick Emenware, the safety from South Carolina, not Malachi Starks making this list, but Emenware, I think because Starks has been projected earlier by a lot of people. And there was Bob McGinn, who always does the piece with my friend Tyler Dunn over on his newsletter. He does the piece of what scouts are saying. And apparently scouts are very, very high on Malachi Starks, maybe being drafted earlier than the current projections. But I would have had Starks here, I think, over Emenware, but you could see them both as being the types of players that Brian Flores would really like. And then 5th on NFL IQ's top targets for the Vikings is Gray Zabel, who we have talked about ad nauseum. He makes the list over the 2 other guards, which, is interesting to me. Whether Tyler Booker or Donovan Jackson or who would it be for the Vikings when it comes to the consensus guard for them? Why it's Gray Zabel? Is Gray Zabel going to go earlier, or do people just really not believe in Tyler Booker? That kind of seems to be the case, that people just really were out on Tyler Booker after that Combine. I have not heard from people that I talked to, including Jeremiah Searles, which go back and watch that episode. But Jeremiah Searles said he still thinks that he's worth a first-round draft pick, even with the Combine not being that great. So, all right, let me get to your questions. We'll get rolling in the conversation. But I thought it was interesting that Zabel was the guy that they picked and not Donovan Jackson or Tyler Booker. I think Booker is all the way down to 47th or something on the mock draft consensus. That one might be just an overreaction to the combine, or the NFL might react to that. I don't know. We'll find out. Caleb says, if JJ and Dallas Turner had waited to declare for the 2025 draft, where do you think each of them would be drafted in this year's draft? So JJ McCarthy would be a top 3 pick. I think we could pretty clearly say that, because I mean, the options are not particularly good. Now, I will have to ask somebody. I have not asked anyone about which guy is a better prospect, Cam Ward or JJ McCarthy. I think they're very, very different. Now, just if we're using comparisons, Michael Penix was drafted over JJ McCarthy last year, and Penix had a similar type of resume. It was a little different with some injuries, but huge production, played for many years in college football. But the NFL kind of likes that. I remember Kwesi saying last year at the Combine, somebody asked him about the quarterbacks being in college for longer, and he said something like, yeah, we kind of look at it as a minor league. Like minor league years, if you're dominating college at 24 years old, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think at one time it was thought of as being a bad thing, but now it's looked at as, hey, the more experience a quarterback gets actually playing football, the better. And that's kind of an old scouting thing, is, hey, the guy's got to have at least 30 starts. And we have seen a lot of quarterbacks not have success in the Anthony Richardson mold, where it's 1 year and they shine, and then it's okay, the guy gets drafted really high and then doesn't work out. We have seen that a number of times, but the comparison of Cam Ward and JJ McCarthy is very much apples to oranges, because Cam Ward had a ton of crazy production this year, played really, really well against or for Miami, and put up massive numbers. He's got a cannon for an arm. I think he's a playmaker, but he's not a freak runner like we've seen in the NFL. And McCarthy is somebody that didn't have necessarily the numbers, but had the winning and also had the upside and the physical traits as well to become a very good quarterback. I think Ward might have gone over McCarthy, but I don't know. I'll have to ask somebody who does this 365 and looks closer, because I've just kind of been whatever on Cam Ward, but I haven't taken a close look at him. The Vikings are not drafting him, nor do they have any real chance to. So I haven't dove deep into Ward. I just know I watched him a few times and was like, I don't know, kind of plays a little crazy for somebody that might not have the physical traits of a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, who played crazy in college. But if I was asked to draft one of the two of them, I don't know. I'd probably go McCarthy at the top myself. As far as Dallas Turner, well, the interesting thing about Dallas Turner is that everybody had him as a top 10 pick last year, and then he dropped down the board because of a very unique circumstance. And that circumstance was 6 quarterbacks being taken. That's never happened before, ever, in the NFL draft. So with only 1 and maybe 2 in the top 10, Dallas Turner clearly would have been higher. Now, this is another position that's hard for me to compare. I can't tell you how Dallas Turner compares to Abdul Carter, because I just haven't really looked at Carter or asked anyone about him, because we're mostly focused on the show on guys that the Vikings might go after. I've seen Carter and I think he's awesome. Is that different from Turner? Because I thought Dallas Turner's college tape was phenomenal from what we saw with him in Alabama. His production was phenomenal. So he might be the only behind Abdul Carter. If Turner was considered to be a top 5 draft pick last year, he would have gone higher, I think. Though there was the wide receivers, man, the Rome Odunze, the Marvin Harrison. So maybe that's really why. And in this year's draft, he would have gone a lot higher. But I do think that Turner was widely considered by people on the outside to be a top 10 talent. And honestly, Atlanta probably still, I mean, if they hadn't taken Michael Penix, maybe they would have taken Dallas Turner. It's a strange world out there of like who you would draft, who you wouldn't. Or why a guy falls who has such talent as Dallas Turner. But Turner, I think, for sure would have been a top 10 draft pick this year. I mean, some of the other guys that are edge rushers, it's, well, this guy's from Marshall. Okay. It's not that you can't be from Marshall. I mean, Khalil Mack is from the University of Buffalo, so you can, but it's not quite the same as putting up those huge numbers at Alabama. Or this guy, Shamar Stewart, well, he hasn't really produced anything, but did you see his combine? Like, okay, well, I've long felt like that's not very good logic when it comes to drafting a guy. So good question, though. Really good question. Gets 99 says, how do you feel about Walter Nolan? I like Walter Nolan. So the reason I like Harmon a little bit better, I think he's a little more polished, and his pass rushing stats were just better. I mean, just better. And that's always going to get my attention. Although Nolan was elite against the run and very good against the pass and had good sack production. But when you look at the grades and the pressures, Harmon was far ahead. What I like about Nolan is he looks to me a guy who could line up anywhere on the D line, where you could have him in the three technique spot, you could have him over a tackle, and he's just got so much strength, quickness, but really I think strength is his thing. And you get on the inside there and start throwing people around like Walter Nolan does. It's impressive. And it's not perfect. There's definitely some times where, I've read about him a little bit. I try to watch a little bit of every guy that the Vikings might target. I'm not claiming to be a film grinder that's going to do an all 22 breakdown for you. There's a lot of people better at that with college prospects than me. But when it comes to guys that the Vikings could go after, I want to see what he looks like. And what I see is Nolan throwing people around, and his get off, if you will, very, very quick. It looks like somebody who could get into the backfield. So if that's the guy they went with instead of Derek Harmon, okay. But there are times where maybe doesn't have quite the same motor as Harmon. I don't want to say that with like really definitively. I'd have to read what other people think, but that's just how it felt to me. I felt like Derek Harmon had this motor where you're like, okay, that guy is not going to be stopped. But I like him. If he gets into the backfield, I like him. Let's see. Christopher, says, how much of Shedeur Sanders' draft status is increased by his last name? I don't know about that. I think when you get to the NFL level, it doesn't really matter. I don't think that anybody in the NFL is saying, you know what, this is Deion's son, so we've heard a lot about him and we actually like him. Now, if there's a crazy owner, okay, so that could be the case. If there was a crazy owner who was just demanding that their team draft Shedeur Sanders because he's Deion's son, that is a possibility. Let's assume that it's not. So 2 years ago, when Deion first got to Colorado, I wanted to watch a lot of it. Look, I mean, I grew up in the Deion era. I'm captivated by the guy. And to see him take a program that was such garbage and make it competitive with Hunter and Sanders, and they would play all these crazy close games. So I enjoyed watching them. And what I really liked about Shedeur Sanders was his accuracy, the way he threw the football. It comes out of his hand really well, but he anticipates very well. And he just, when you could throw accurately, the only place you could start is, can you throw accurately in the NFL? If you can't throw accurately, you pretty much can't play here. So he's got my attention with that. And last year he played better than he did the year before. But what I started to notice was just that even though his offensive line was bad, and even though I don't think his offense was actually that good, he's got some serious warts, and one of them is taking sacks. And to me, that's always, I don't know. If you're not Jaden Daniels, who can run away from anybody on this planet, it's pretty hard to be that guy, to be the Patrick Mahomes type, the playmaker, I'm going to run. And we saw this from Sam Darnold. If you turn around, run backwards, they will catch you. And Darnold got away with it a couple of times, but at the end of the day, playing against the Rams, what happened? They tracked him down. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have his arm. I mean, I think that he is kind of what a typical second round pick would have been in years past. So they just don't really draft a lot of quarterbacks in the second round anymore. But think about like when Teddy went 32nd, and then it was Derek Carr right after that. And there might have been one other quarterback that was a late first, second round type of pick. Those are the types that I would match up with Shedeur Sanders as a prospect. But desperation might force him to be a little bit higher than that, I think. But I think he's an NFL prospect for sure. I mean, he throws a great football, and he's been around the league for his entire life, which I think helps in terms of his experience and adjustment. But I just don't know that the skills are there to be talking about someone who's going to be a clear-cut franchise quarterback with any higher of a ceiling than someone like Derek Carr. If he becomes that, you could potentially win with him on your rookie deal. What I think it comes down to with Shedeur Sanders is just where he goes. And I know that's everybody, but there are some people who can transcend where they go. He's not one of them. James says, given this draft contains the last of the players with the extra COVID eligibility, how many draft picks do you think is ideal? And how many do you think that will end up taking? I don't know how much the COVID eligibility has to do with much now, other than I think NIL is going to also cause players to stay longer. Now, their last couple of drafts, they've seen a lot of 24-year-olds that we're not going to see otherwise. But in future drafts, because players can make a lot of money in college, I think they could stay longer and they could develop a little bit longer. And we're going to see more 22, 23-year-olds. It was a lot of times if you were 23, the NFL was like, take him in the 7th round. Who cares? The old man, he's disgusting. Don't even look at him. He's 23. But now it really isn't that way. I think after a lot of guys prove that it's okay to draft someone with more experience, and you could still see them become a star pretty quickly. Maybe this is deeper. Maybe that's what you're insinuating, that it's deeper. And I've heard people say that there is good prospects into the 4th, into the 5th. But to your main question, because I don't really, it's hard to say. Like, we're going to find out within 3 years, I guess, whether it was actually deeper or not, or whether the COVID eligibility helped or hurt, or I don't really know. But that might be something. When it comes to how many draft picks I think is ideal, well, you'd like to have 12, but they have 4. So they're not going to get to 12. Imagine how much more fun our mock drafts would be if they had 12. I mean, do something, Quasey, right? Like give me some mocks I can work with, some draft sims where I don't have to do all this trading down. I'm kidding, but I think that the middle round is where they are most likely to trade down. So the early part, 24, there's a very good stick and pick argument, or maybe they move down a little, but 97, you could go back a little bit from there. And if somebody is desperate to take a guy that they really love or their scouts really love and they move up. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move down in the middle rounds, if maybe they don't see a big difference between 97 and 112 or whatever, that they could drop back and get some of those later round picks. I'll go with 7. I think they end up at the end of the day with 7 players. How about that? I don't know though. I mean, maybe Quasey will try to make history, have the best 4-man draft anyone's ever had. I don't know. Steel Horse Travels says people are concerned with JJ's lack of production, small sample size. They say, well, it's not really they say. I mean, it's a small sample size. But am I missing the fact that he was running a more pro-style offense under Harbaugh? I've never cared about that at all. I mean, it is a total myth of pro-style, whatever. I mean, the NFL is so much more complicated. You could come from a cartoon offense where they have no play calls, or you can come from a pro or whatever. Your adjustment is going to be massive. Think about the old John Gruden camp where Cam Newton, he said, well, give me a play call. And Cam was like, we didn't have play calls. It was just like 1, 2, 3, 4. And those are the plays we ran. And he's like, okay, that's weird. Fine. And there were a lot of people who said, well, you can't draft Cam Newton. Like, he doesn't know anything. Well, it turned out that he won an NFL MVP, took a team to a Super Bowl. And also our friend Jeremiah Soros played with Cam, said he was one of the most locked in on the playbook guys in command of the offense that he's ever been around. I mean, so it really is how you adjust. I think that JJ McCarthy's adjustment was the most impressive part, because last year when he came in, oh man, was he in over his head. You could tell in mini camp and OTAs, he was way in over his head with the new footwork, learning on the fly. It is very, very difficult. And then by the time he got to the end of training camp, he seemed like he was very much in command of the offense and understanding it at that point. And that's where you really don't know what somebody's going to look like until they get there. You can't tell. How are they going to adjust? Can they go from a pro system, whatever? I think when it comes to McCarthy, whatever happened in college just doesn't matter anymore. That's my opinion. Last year, when they drafted him, you could go back and watch the video if you want to find it, my reaction to JJ McCarthy getting drafted. And I said, whatever happens from here out is going to shape my opinion, not what he did in college. I don't care what he did in college. I don't care how many passes he threw. I don't care who his coach was. I don't care if they were stealing the signals. I don't care what happened. what I see at OTAs, minicamp, training camp is going to be a lot more telling than anything in college. And that's always been the case with every prospect the Vikings have ever had. Kellen Mond was a good prospect. He was. You go back and watch his college tape, he played well in a lot of games. He was fast and, he really looked in command of that pro style offense. He got to OTAs and minicamp and was like, okay, and we can just move on now. And now he's playing in the UFL, and I think his offensive coordinator just quit. Like, some guys are built for this and some guys aren't, and you don't find out until they're really there. So you can argue with people, oh, he's got the small sample size, he's got this, he's got that. So far, to me, he looked like someone who could play quarterback in the NFL. He certainly convinced Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings organization in a very, very important year that he could be the guy. I think that's a lot more telling than whatever he did with Jim Harbaugh. Vikings Jerome, is it possible they draft a quarterback in this year's draft? It's always possible of anything. They do not have enough draft picks to just be tossing one at a Nate Stanley or something at the back end. I know Tom Brady, Brock Purdy, it's happened before. My opinion has always been, if you're not taking him in the first or second, don't bother. Don't even think about it. Just move on. And every time they've drafted a Jaron Hall, I remember when they drafted Jaron Hall and I said, guys, I just don't see the use. And I got a lot of, well, he might be actually, and you're probably not. There's been a couple. I don't see the point in it. They should keep Brett Rippon. They should get Joe Flacco or somebody, and they should bring in an undrafted free agent quarterback. Don't waste a draft pick on a 5th round guy who's not going to do anything. I don't see any point in doing that. Now, the 49ers can argue, hey, we took Brock Purdy and got lucky. Okay, well, do the Vikings have a bunch of 7th round picks? I just don't see any point in doing that. When it's JJ McCarthy's show, who are you developing and for what? To hope for a future backup? I don't know. I never saw the point with Jaron Hall, to be honest with you, and I don't see the point now. Deontay says Aaron Jones also mentioned how he thought that it could have turned into a quarterback competition had he not gotten hurt. Thank you for adding that, Deontay. And you were right about that. And I think that that's true, that it could have been. And I reported that last year that if Sam Darnold had started poorly, that they felt like he was close enough to make things interesting. I don't believe it was ever a quarterback competition through minicamp, OTAs, or training camp, but it was about to be interesting when they got to the joint practices of Darnold and JJ McCarthy. And I don't know that McCarthy could have done anything to actually take that job away from him. Like, even if he had great joint practices, it had been Darnold the whole time, it would be a huge adjustment. But I do think that he showed enough that if he had gone to the joint practices in Cleveland and played well, that if Darnold had gotten off to a slow start, it would have been JJ McCarthy's show. But the thing is, McCarthy never would have played last year the way that Darnold held it down. I don't even think after the Jacksonville meltdown that they would have made the switch at that point, because they were still, 7-2. So, but it really does speak to, I mean, that's the thing. It's like when we've been talking about these things and I'm giving you my opinions and my reporting and everything else, and then I hear it come out of Aaron Jones's mouth, you're like, hey, that's what I've been saying. Scott says, give me 2 free agents we need to add, and also who is the midseason trade projection? Well, now we're too far down the road. Midseason trade is pretty tough for me to figure out, because I think if the Vikings were doing something like that, it would be to make up for an injury, like a Cam Robinson or a Cam Akers situation. So what position gets injured? I don't know. If there's one spot, well, we need to know who they draft first also for what doesn't have depth. Maybe you'd be looking at a corner or something like that. Maybe a linebacker if somebody got hurt, or pass rush. I mean, I don't know. That's hard to figure out who the target would be for a midseason trade. But you do get a neck roll for asking, because if you're thinking about midseason trades on April 10th, that's the good stuff right there. You're locked in. As far as who they need to sign that is still remaining out there, I've got 2 guys, and you know who they are. I would say a left guard, if they don't draft one, would be Will Hernandez. Could be somebody they look at, really focus on that competition with Blake Brandel. and the other one is clearly a backup quarterback. I think they've added a little bit to that wide receiver room with a special teamer, Tim Jones. And I think that they could use maybe some competition at safety. Is Julian Blackmon still out there? Former Colts guy that they moved on from to sign Cam Bynum, but he's got good numbers from last year. You'd like a little competition if they don't draft a safety. If they don't draft a safety, I'm good with Theo Jackson. I was impressed with Theo Jackson last year. All that we talked about it coming out of training camp, clearly, again, the team agreed because they signed him to that contract. But I don't think the contract they signed him to screams this guy should never have any competition. So maybe I would go with somebody who's still sitting out there as a safety. Justin Simmons, I think, still wants to play. He was on a podcast the other day talking about that. So maybe just a veteran safety for competition. Probably goes for almost any position. Cornerback. I know people have talked about Asante Samuel. Maybe he's that guy. They could. It's all depends. If they draft a corner, well, now my answer is not corner. It's guard. If they draft a guard. Now my answer is corner or safety. Kind of depends. I also think that they could use one more running back because they clearly aren't doing the Ty Chandler thing. So if he's going to be the kick returner, but Isaiah Rodgers could also be the kick returner with his speed. Rondale Moore could be the kick returner. That's who I was forgetting for wide receiver competition. Rondale Moore. A lot of options there. So, they could add a veteran running back too. Rants. Do the lack of first-round pick trades this year and the Bucs GM's comments about nobody trading up make it less likely the Vikings will be able to obtain extra picks on trade downs? I think that is the case, yes. Or everybody's telling the same story to trick you and try to up the prices. I don't know if that's really it. I mean, I really think that this is a year and all the data will tell you, hey, picks 40 through 50 are not like picks 15 through 25, but maybe picks 25 through 40, there's not that big of a difference, or it's all on preference, or it's all on need, and teams are not looking at guys who are still there. Now, that's what they're saying now, though. Let's say we get to draft night and you are the Tampa Bay Bucks, and all of a sudden, oh man, oh wow, that guy that we had as our 15th best player, like he's still available, and get on the phone and make the call. Let's try to get, that stuff happens. So I wouldn't count it out. I think that there's a few things around draft time that kind of always get said. One of them is that picks 15 through 50 aren't that big of a difference. There's only X number of real first round picks. You kind of hear that all the time. So what's real this year and what's not? I have been told two different things on the 15 through 50. I tried to ask people at the combine and at the owners' meetings, like, hey, is that real? And one person said, oh, yeah, that's really real, more this year than any other year. And then I heard from somebody else, like, it's kind of a cliche. We want to take the best player. So I don't know. Yeah, hard to know. But I think there will be trades ultimately when we get to the draft night. It's, do the Vikings have that guy drop? So I went through those NFL IQ guys, and if they've got Malachi Starks as the 9th best player on the board, like their boards look different than consensus mock boards, and people will never figure that out. I think sometimes, like, yeah, the NFL teams don't always look at everything the same way that mock drafters do. That's how Will Levis goes in the second, or Malik Willis is a 3rd round pick, or Desmond Ritter's a 3rd round pick, or whatever. So if the Vikings were looking at, and they're making their players and they're looking at their targets and going, somebody brought up Walter Nolan. Hey, Walter Nolan's our 3rd favorite player or something. You'd be like, okay, we should just take him, right? Because maybe the next guy on the list. So you don't know how that's going to play out. Or if all of their guys in the top 15 go, all right, well, there's 4 DTs left, and how they come off the board in the order, this all matters too. Well, there's 4 DTs left, and let's just see, is there going to be a run here on DTs? Do we need to take one now, or could we move down and one of those guys will be there? The dynamics kind of all end up playing out on draft night. So that's just to say, I wouldn't count it out. Aaron says, do you look into the top 30 visits for an idea who they might be leaning toward? I've seen about 15 of the players who visited, but not all of them. I usually do not. When it comes to the top 30 visits, because teams like to play games with those, and they also will bring guys in that sometimes they're a little dubious on. and they want to confirm that they are dubious on those players or just give them another chance. So it's not always, oh, we are interested in you, so we will bring you here. Trying to figure that out is pretty tough. Although Siobhan Ravel was the one that stuck out to me because, and I don't know, like he's a guy with an interesting backstory and he's got the ACL thing. So they might have wanted to take a look a little closer with the injury and get a good sense for where he stands with that. I don't know what's all allowed in those 30 visits, but I imagine health is a discussion at times. But he was the one that stood out because there's been, I think, a little debating on corner within Vikings fans. Oh, is corner? Well, they already have Rodgers, they already have McGlothern and Blackman, and I think that none of those guys precludes you from drafting a corner. And maybe the fact that they brought in Ravel kind of says we're looking at corners. But they also brought in the local kid from Minnesota who's a tackle, and they're not looking at tackles. So I don't know. Subterfuge, playing games, four-dimensional chess. It's draft season, everybody. But yeah, I don't look that closely at that. James says, given Aaron Jones' receiving ability and age, as well as free agents over 30, do you think that we should draft their replacements, or just, do you mean just Aaron Jones replacements this year, or do you feel like the current depth is sufficient? Or do you mean, I'm sorry, the other free agents too? So Aaron Jones and the other free agents, should you draft their replacements? With Aaron Jones, I would say no, because Jordan Mason is pretty young and you can do it any year. Running back is absolutely the position where you can draft and play right away the fastest. It's not even close. I think second place is maybe safety and then wide receiver, but running back is far and away the first position when this was looked at a few years ago by PFF that could step in right away. So you draft one when you need one. You don't wait around, or you don't try to draft and develop one. You draft one when you need one. I look at as running back. The other positions, though, I mean, yes, of course. I mean, defensive tackle is very high on my list because you have two guys that are essentially on 2-year contracts who can rotate. And that's the biggest thing is it doesn't have to be exactly their replacements, but you can rotate. If you draft Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon, you could just play him sometimes. You could play him 450 snaps. Look at Milton Williams and what he brought to the Philadelphia Eagles. A 500 snap guy is not an insult. Like that could be somebody who really helps in key situations as a pass rusher, or Kenneth Grant in run stuffing. But in general, I always like to think a year or two down the road with every position. That's why, I mean, safety is a now and later. Malachi Starks or Nick Emenware could play right now, or they could also take Harrison Smith's job later. And I think they were thinking a couple years out with even someone like Lewis Seen when they attempted that was, well, you bring him in now, but then Harrison Smith might retire. So you're trying to look down the road. I think replacing big needs right away is difficult, but looking at those players at defensive tackle and thinking 2 years down the road is a pretty solid plan, especially if you hit on a defensive tackle. Those guys tend to be good for a really long time. They tend to be good for like 10 years if you get a good DT. Junk Buster, love that. I don't know what it means, but initially I like it. Junk Buster said, would you be opposed to a lineman at 24th overall, an offensive lineman? No, I'm not. The one fear that I have about that is just that when it comes to offensive linemen, you have to be a little bit wary because they do not have a great history of playing well in their first year. So I wrote about this actually today about how a guard is a good draft pick. You bring them in, they compete with Blake Brandel. If they don't win the job, that's okay. And maybe they come in mid-season or their depth right away, and then it's a long-term option. Or if you get lucky, that guy could be a contributor and he's got good things to his right and left that can help up his play. But just historically speaking, I went back to 2021. I've looked recently at all the interior offensive linemen. As far as guys who played above average, very few played above average. Now, the Vikings saw it from Pat Elflein, played well right away, and then the injury kind of ruined his career, but they've seen it in the past a couple of times. But someone like Ed Ingram, the issue with Ed Ingram was they spent a high draft pick on him. They didn't really give him a lot of competition. It was him and Jesse Davis was the guy that he was competing against. I mean, that's like nothing at that point in Jesse Davis's career. And then when the guy wins the job, you got to play him every single play. There's no hiding him. There's no rotating him. So if you draft Tyler Booker and he wins the job, you got to play him every play. And then what becomes hard is, well, do you bench him if he's struggling? Is he going to develop and fight through it? It becomes this whole thing that is a little tricky to figure out if he's not great right away. It doesn't mean I'd say completely stay away. They've spent so much money on the offensive line now with O'Neal and Darisaw and Fries. You want to have somebody on a rookie contract in there. I've liked the idea of Gray Zabel, but with the understanding that Gray Zabel will have to develop. Steven says Kwesi has dipped into the 30 visits during his first 3 drafts, so it's a key to pay attention to who they are. I don't know. I understand what you're saying. Like, he's drafted guys who they've had in on visits, but I don't look at that and say, oh, we could figure out what Kwesi's thinking. This is obvious. But I do think that bringing in somebody like Ravel is interesting for that position in particular. So I'm always hesitant to say, oh, we've got them figured out, because we're not in those meetings. We don't know what they're thinking all the time. Let me get in a quick live read, because this show has sponsors, which is really great, and I appreciate it. And then we'll continue with your questions. So I was thinking about I'm not wearing a hat today, so we're doing okay here. But if you're a hat guy because you're trying to cover up for the hair loss, I did see the other day that receding hairlines are in. I'm not really convinced of that. But if you're somebody that wants to do a little work on the dome, I've got something for you. It's called Hims. If you lost your hair, doesn't mean you can't find it again. Hims Hair Loss Solutions can help you join the hundreds of thousands of subscribers who have found their hair again. It makes treating hair loss very simple with clinically proven ingredients. You choose from personalized chewable oral spray or serum treatments to find what works best for you. And the process is simple, 100% online, no uncomfortable doctor visits. Start your free online visit today, hims.com/Purple Insider. That is HIMS.com/Purple Insider for you to get your personalized hair loss treatment options. If you need prescription products, they do require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See the website for full details and safety information. All right, let's continue to move down the list here. And I do have to run to dinner with in-laws family in like 40 minutes. So we'll rapid fire through some of these. And Clay's got some questions behind the scenes as well that he's been cooking up. So I'll do my best. Matt says, don't think it's been more than a 5% chance of happening, but might as well bring up a tight end option again. Oliver's a free agent after this year. Munt had 430 snaps. You can't get me there with a tight end. You just can't. They're available all the time. You could find guys. You've got TJ Hawkinson set to make like $20 million on the cap. I mean, it's just not a hard position to replace. They got Josh Oliver. They had Tyler Conklin as a 5th, round development player who worked out. They have so many other positions that make so much more sense that I just don't see any reason to discuss the tight end position unless we're talking about 5th round tight ends. And even then, I mean, when you have tight end 1 all set, there's really no reason to dig into that unless you are ready for that guy to go. And to me, Oliver is somebody that you can replace easily in free agency at a very reasonable price. Junk Buster says Malachi Starks will be gone before our pick. That's the thing, Junk Buster, is that everybody around these times, they always think that they know exactly how it's going to play out. You always know, right? Because you look at enough mock drafts and all those things, and you think, well, and this is Steven brings this up as well about Gray Zabel, about Paul Allen thinking that Gray Zabel will be gone by the Vikings pick. Look, did any of you have Dallas Turner being a guy who would drop in the draft? The answer is absolutely not. Every mock drafter had him locked it. Look, if we know how this was going to play out, if we knew exactly how this was going to play out, then why would we do it? Right? I mean, I mean, if the mock drafters all knew, it wouldn't be any fun. It wouldn't be. You wouldn't have to watch. You would just know. Aaron says, "Is Shedeur Sanders like a slower Justin Fields? Way slower. I don't think he's got the arm of Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields was an amazing prospect. He just got put on one of the worst teams with horrible coaching and then never figured out how to see the field, which is something that's hard to separate because Sam Darnold also never saw the field until he did with Kevin O'Connell and with Justin Jefferson. I don't think that Justin Fields is ever going to be a great quarterback, but I think under the right circumstances, he could have been good with his physical traits. I think his physical traits are way better than Shedeur Sanders. I don't even think it's anywhere close. I don't think it's just slower. I think it's this guy doesn't throw the ball anywhere near as hard as Justin Fields, but he might be more accurate, might be more of a true pocket quarterback. But Fields, he played from the pocket in college. Yeah, I don't know. So Rob says James Pierce looks to be falling because of off-field stuff. Could he be a Kwesi bargain? I think what Kevin O'Connell said at the owners' meetings was accurate in talking about the guy has to have a clear path to the field. Now, maybe James Pierce would. And I've actually been thinking about this. I wanted to bring this up because Jahad Campbell is somebody that I saw some, who knows, random Twitter account. Like, I know who everyone's going to draft. Like, sure you do, pal. Putting it out there, but why not talk about it anyway? Because it's draft season and the credibility of, I won't say it, but random accounts, who knows, right? But Jahad Campbell is a guy that actually is kind of interesting for a Brian Flores because we've kind of locked in, and this doesn't address James Pierce, because I think he's so much of a true edge that I don't know if you could really do that with Dallas Turner there as well, and Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard. You're not really rotating those guys too much. But Jahad Campbell, I like Ivan Pace Jr. as much as the next guy. I really like Ivan Pace Jr. But if you took a Jahad Campbell and paired him as a pass rusher / cover guy, can do it all with Blake Cashman, that's the one guy that we've never talked about and have never talked about who you can actually make a pretty good argument for because he's more of a true linebacker and not an edge, but he can also blitz really effectively. That I might say I should include maybe in just my 30 guys that I think the Vikings could draft, because if he were to drop, I don't think he's going to drop, but if he were to drop, maybe they would just have to take him and figure it out because Pace is good. He is good. But is he good enough to pass on that level of talent? Probably not. Let's see. King Cleaver says, I know this is not the topic, but I think we should trade Addison and Hawkinson. I mean, that's great that you think that, but you're not happy. I mean, it's not happening. Why would you do that? And get a second and a fourth? I mean, are you just doing mock drafts all day? Because I would not trade a 1,000-yard receiver who is on his rookie contract and a Pro Bowl tight end. I just would not do that. That does not seem like a good idea. That means it's been too long of an offseason for you. That's really what's going on there. You've been doing those draft sims and you're getting ticked off because you're bored. You want more draft picks. I think when you have good players, you should just not get rid of them. That's what I would do. It's a crazy take, but that's what I'd do. Rob says, has anyone heard anything about Jack Jones? Seems to have gone quiet. Yeah, he was released, and I imagine some teams are looking at him. There definitely are some off-field issues there with Jack Jones. I know the Vikings may have been interested. I think that there was a report that they put in, and when he was on waivers, they put in for him, and they didn't get him because the Raiders were ahead of the Vikings at the time. So he might be somebody they look at, but once again, we're at that point where you don't want to sign anybody that could mess up your comp pick strategy. And that's why we're seeing absolutely no moves, because why would you do it today when you could do it May 1st and then you don't have to potentially pay? And if there's a bunch of offers for Jack Jones, and the other thing is too, teams want to see who they draft. They don't know today who they're drafting. 5 teams probably do, but aside from that, we don't know. So you might not want to draft, or you might not want to pick up Jack Jones if you're going to draft a corner. So you got to wait. And that's why there's just no movement on these free agents. But then that may be part of it, that nobody was going to claim him with his current contract, and they just decided, we'll just wait. But I don't know how interested I am in Jones. I mean, he looks like he's a pretty dynamic player who could be a Brian Flores special if he wants him, but he really did not play well last year for the Raiders. Bradley, if we were to move back and in the draft and get maybe 2 more picks, do you see a scenario of drafting a quarterback later or a linebacker before the 3rd round? Well, definitely, I just don't see any point to drafting a quarterback. Drafting a quarterback is, to me, taking a draft pick and lighting it on fire. I know everybody loves quarterbacks, and they love when they're drafted because we've all seen them and have opinions on them, and everybody loves quarterback. And you can always say, well, you can never have too many quarterbacks. And I guess that's true. But in this case, what's the point? If you draft a Will Howard, like, what are you doing with him? He's just going to sit there for 3 years. And I mean, you want a veteran backup for JJ McCarthy. You don't want this. He's going to be behind Joe Flacco. What are you doing? Even if they got extra picks. But to your point about linebacker, yeah, I mean, when you look at the backup linebacker situation or into the future, I mean, it's Eric Wilson, but you need guys who can rotate into that position or just fill in type of players. I don't see it as the highest priority, but once you get past like round 3, I still probably wouldn't do it in round 3 unless there's somebody that they think could be a real game changer for them and can actually win the job over Ivan Pace. But Ivan Pace has been pretty good. It would have to be like a Jahad Campbell that's an absolute freak, and you're like, okay, well, figure it out. Just get enough talent. But if it's in the 3rd round, I still think you need to go need adjacent, need-ish, one of those positions that you don't have already kind of clearly filled and the guy can't get on the field. Taylor says the only question for JJ at this point to me is how is he physically? If he's 100%, let's roll with JJ. Well, yeah, I mean, they are rolling with JJ, and it's clear that he must be physically ready enough for them to go with him. Otherwise, they would have signed Aaron Rodgers, I guess, because Aaron Rodgers really wanted to sign with them. The question about JJ McCarthy is what's he going to look like when he really plays football? I mean, there's no question about his work ethic. There's no question about, can he lead a football team? Is he a winner? Does he got the right stuff? Does he care enough about football? I mean, we found all that out last year. Can he learn? Can he develop? Can he be on the same page with Kevin O'Connell? We learned all that stuff last year. How does he look when he gets in a real football game, moving real speed, and he's got to throw accurately? That's the biggest part for me, because you could throw accurately in practice when you're working your way through it, but can you throw accurately when it's really going at the real speed? And can you make the decisions quick enough? I think he can over a long period of time, but he hasn't played a lot of football. So those are the biggest questions for me. Caleb said, with the Vikings going edge outside linebacker be shocking. Let's say Mike Green, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewart falls, and they're at the top of the Vikings big board. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty shocking. I haven't looked a lot at edge because you have such a big investment in Dallas Turner. They believe in Dallas Turner. And not only that, but they have 2 other guys that are under contract. We could see them potentially extend Andrew Van Ginkel. Grenard's going to be here for a long time. How does that guy get on the field? And we saw it even from last year, how hard it was for Dallas Turner to get on the field. If it's somebody that they are just totally enamored with, same as the James Pierce thing, they are totally enamored. This guy is so much better than any other prospect. We got to get him. I guess I could see it, but I think what O'Connell said at the owners' meetings was the truth. It has to be at a position where the guy's going to be able to get on the field. But if they don't like what they saw with Turner and they're planning on Van Ginkel leaving, then that would certainly tell us a lot. All right. Let me speed run through a few more of these. Yes, Taylor came in late. I am in my in-laws' back den is where I am at the moment. So that's why I'm looking more studious, like I read lots of books on cars. My father-in-law reads a lot of books on cars, not me. Julian Blackmon and Jordan Whitehead are both out there. So yeah, if they don't draft a safety, then that would make a lot of sense. Brett says, as much as I wouldn't love a safety, Emanware's athleticism is so rare that elite level rarely bursts for a defensive back. Yeah, so you're right about Eminware. And sorry, Eminware is the rare athletic traits to me with Brian Flores are interesting. And I just think that Brian Flores in particular with a safety, like that is more valuable than it would be with another team. If this was another team that just played its safeties really deep and kind of hung out back there and the front seven was the key, okay. But the Viking safeties, they get to the line of scrimmage. They blitz. Eminware blitzing seems pretty good to me. And they're dropping back. They're moving forward. He played a lot in the box in college. So that kind of freak athlete, I think, it's intriguing. And I know Steven said he doesn't think Eminware has football IQ. Well, I mean, come on, man. I don't know how any of us can know that. I mean, I've read differing opinions on what his instincts are and what you could see on tape, but I don't think that any of us can know someone's football IQ by sitting out here. If Brian Flores drafts him, then I think we know he's got pretty high IQ, because Flores is not going to draft somebody who doesn't. John says this conversation makes it evident why you don't spend draft picks recklessly. My only knock on Kwesi. I'm not sure what you mean by recklessly. Like which picks were reckless? I don't know if they've had any. I don't know if they've had reckless picks. I'm not sure what that would even be. Would that be like the kicker, or maybe the Jaron Hall thing? I don't know. It was really in 2022. They drafted positions that I didn't love for them to draft. But I'm not sure if there was one where I went, oh my gosh, they're going crazy. I would think more crazy would be if you were trading up a lot. Or maybe you think the Turner thing was reckless. Maybe you think that was reckless. I guess we're going to find out whether that is or not. King Dickum says, if Harmon is there, that should be our guy. I would be happy with a surprise pick at wide receiver or tight end. I don't know why tight end keeps coming up, but wide receiver, you could use a wide receiver because you said King Dickum added we don't need those positions. Wide receiver is one that I always think that you need. I just always, I mean, unless a team has 3 top-notch guys, I always think you need them because they're very expensive. They're very hard to find. They barely ever hit free agency, and the only times you can acquire them are when they're old or mad. So if you take one, it's good value, and you can always fit them in. I've brought this up, but KJ Osborne had 90 targets in 2022. It's an important position. Sean says, of any of the recent draft busts the Vikings have had in recent years, which prospect was the one you were most surprised didn't work out? That's a good question. Which one is the biggest surprise? Well, I guess I would say the way that Lewis Cine didn't work out was maybe the biggest surprise overall, because it did not work out in mind-blowing fashion of never ever getting on the field. Now I'm going to have to pull up the draft picks and see which one I was most surprised by. I was a little surprised by Laquan Treadwell because I thought he was pretty awesome in college, but I had not done like a lot of research there. Oh, I know the guy. I'll give you the one that I gave an A+ to on draft night. That's right. This draft grader right here, A+, not just A+, to a guard, because I was, even back then, very exhausted by the guard position. That would be Wyatt Davis. Yep. Good college player at Ohio State. I was like, man, great pick. Well done, Vikings. Wyatt Davis, let's go. I don't know. Didn't seem to love football, I think, was the issue. Came in out of shape, was running gassers after training camp practice, and it was like, okay, well, that was a very bad draft grade by me. Steven says, would Rondale Moore fit for the speedy, shifty underneath guy? If Rondale Moore makes the team, those guys are taking swings at those guys, and it's not always a guarantee that they work. I mean, you're talking about a 1-year small contract. If he is healthy and if he makes the team and it works out, then it does have like a high ceiling of him being that guy. Yes. Mike, no, we did not talk yet about the Garrett Bradbury comments. I'm sure that intern Clay is frustrated with all of you having great questions because usually I get to the bottom of the scroll screen faster, and that's when we go to the bullpen. JP says, would love Kwesi went full Howie Roseman and focused on the trenches. Allen and Javon Hargrave are old, and if Harmon and Nolan are there at 24, we should take them. A safety can be taken later. I do think a safety can be taken later, and the history of the development is really good with safeties. The only thing is that Malachi Starks and Nick Emenware are a little bit different when it comes to their talent. I mean, think about like who's the guy that we are talking about potentially making the Hall of Fame, and where was he drafted? That's Harrison Smith. You're looking for a stalwart guy for 10 years if you draft him in the first round at safety. In the third round, you're hoping he can play. Can he play? Can he be a starter? Your upside of a third round safety is he might be pretty good. Is it he could change a franchise like Harrison Smith? Probably not. Asa, a friend of the show. What's up, Asa? Says, can we talk about how the Falcons were right in drafting Michael Penix last season? Imagine how difficult the spot they'd be in right now. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I said it on draft night after I got done laughing. I kind of lost it there on draft night because it just hit me so crazy that Kirk Cousins could be like, it's about what the money represents and all that sort of thing and everything else. And then they just stab him in the back right away by drafting Penix, or they put his Achilles into an MRI machine, or they met with Michael Penix, who I heard was incredibly impressive, even for the Vikings. But yes, they were 100% right. And anybody who didn't see it then was kind of reacting to how crazy it was. Because what are they doing? Like, what are they doing? You're drafting a quarterback for the future because the guy that you have is extremely old. And remember, it was much more of a 2-year contract for Kirk Cousins rather than it was 4, but he got all of his guaranteed money within 2. Hence why he has all of his guaranteed money now settled in at this point. So it's more 2, 3-ish type of deal. I mean, if you're drafting and developing a quarterback down the road who your franchise loves enough to rub Kirk's face in it right after signing him, that means you really love him because you know you're going to get assaulted on the internet after that. Let's see. Oh, Jack Jones wouldn't count against the comp pick. Okay, that's right. He got released. My bad. But Jones has some off-field issues, and he didn't play well recently, so I don't know. I do think, though, same thing still applies, though. Maybe not the comp pick formula, but just teams are waiting to see who they draft before they're signing anyone else. That's what might be why we're not seeing anybody sign. They want to see what their rosters look like after the draft. So, all right. Well, if I don't get Wyatt Davis. Yeah, a lot of people, you guys were on the same page with Wyatt Davis, 100%. All of us thought it was a great draft pick, and it was not. Oh, Snack loves the background. Yeah, well, shout out to my father-in-law here. He's got all these books. Maybe I need to be one of those guys. Okay. I don't have as long for intern Clay as I usually have. We're going to be a little shorter here. And I apologize to you, Clay. Blame all these Vikings fans who on April 10th just want to talk ball, my man. So but that's why you're here. That's why we can afford to have interns on the show, because there are so many very loyal listeners and we appreciate you all. But intern Clay at the University of Pennsylvania presently. What do you got for us today? Garrett Bradbury had some interesting things to say, so let's get involved with Clay's Corner here. How we doing, man?
I'm good, and I can never hate on the chat for having good questions and actively participating. So no complaints here. No complaints here. But anyway, back to Bradbury. He did speak with the media, and he discussed his recent move to the Patriots, and I just wanted to read some quotes and get your reaction to it. He started by saying, "There's no ill will. I'm not bitter towards the Vikings. It's more about, all right, I get to reinvent myself. I get to reprove myself." He then said, "So not even a wake-up call, but it's just new. It's exciting. It's a fresh start, new opportunity." What are your thoughts about this?
So I think with Garrett Bradbury, he is a very smart guy, and he's a very reflective guy. and thoughtful and a great talker. And I interviewed him probably 50 times during my time when he was here in Minnesota. And so I know that he is somebody that will look himself in the mirror with something like this, as he did when he was once benched by the Vikings for Mason Cole in 2021, where he came out and talked with us and he was very honest and said that he had to look himself in the mirror and he had to try to figure out, what it was that happened to go wrong for him to end up being benched. And I think he's probably dealing with the same thing here. But it's also, I think athletes have to tell themselves lies sometimes. And you would know this better than me as a Division I football player. But I think that if you are Garrett Bradbury and you just say, man, I guess I can't pass block, so that's why they moved on from me. That's not going to help your confidence any. I think what you have to do is say, all right, back to square one. What was it that got me traded? And I got to get better. And if you don't have a growth mindset as a player, you're probably going to be a failure. I also think with Garrett Bradbury, I'll always go back to this. They drafted him out of desperation for need. And this is why we're talking about when you guys bring up edge rushers, like, well, maybe because they're not in a spot where they have to desperately draft a position. I think that's one that's kind of buried, but even if it was a linebacker to put next to Blake Cashman, like, okay, because you are in a position to not have to draft for need. Bradbury was a massive reach that was drafted on need. And then when you're a first round draft pick, you're going to get thrown in there and best of luck to you, but they're also going to give you 100 chances. They're not usually going to bench you or move on from you. They're going to give you consistent tries. I mean, even Kadarius Toney, somebody's going to have him. Like, it's the worst first round draft pick still. Lewis Cine is still in the league. Like, that's the point. Like, these first round picks just always get many chances. Where I will apologize for Garrett Bradbury is that his first year in the system in 22, he was pretty good with Kevin O'Connell. And I think he showed at times that he was a quality starting center. But with what they're looking for right now, which is deep dropbacks, long developing routes, he's just not a fit. He might actually be a fine fit in New England. What they asked from him last year, though, was just, you're not going to get great production from a guy that size trying to go up against the defensive tackles that they were facing off. I mean, what was his grade against Jeffrey Simmons? Like, probably a 0. And Tavondre Sweat, I mean, he was not physically big enough. And there's really nothing to reflect on other than, why did my team only spend money on a guard when I left? If I was him, that's what I would be really mad about is, oh, now you got Will Fries after years of forcing him to try to teach former tackles who were picked in the 6th round how to play guard. I think he could have been a lot better had he been given support. That's what I think of Garrett Bradbury, and I wish him the best in New England. But, nothing that he said would sit with me the wrong way. I don't think that he didn't try to get better or didn't reflect on his play when he was in Minnesota.
Yeah, you definitely know a lot more about Garrett Bradbury than I do, but from like an outsider's perspective, I think he has the right mindset. It's it's definitely a hard time for him, like going through this process, but I don't know. It's hard being just a spectator because he's been in the league for 6 years now. He's about to turn 30, and having the reinvent yourself mindset is kind of hard to do when you're at that point in your career. But he's been a solid guard or center, and hopefully he continues to do that in New England. For my next segment, I wanted to kind of go through rapid fire style on some projections for the draft. I matched up some prospects that played the same position, and I just want to tell you, or I want you to tell me who will have a better career and why.
Okay, sounds good. Fired up.
All right, first one, I have Ted McMillan and Luther Burden.
Oh, so both of these guys kind of have something rumblings about them. Did Luther Burden care enough last year? And with Ted McMillan, he was wise enough to tell people that he doesn't watch film, which didn't really seem like what I would have suggested him tell people. I am going to go Luther Burden because I think that the 6'5", I'm going to be a pure outside wide receiver, is just a tough place to be in the NFL today. I think he's got great ability to go up and get it, but he also had a high number of drops, which concerns me. If you drop the ball in college, guess what? It's harder to catch it in the NFL. I don't know if anybody saw it, but there was a video of Matthew Stafford throwing the ball to Bryson DeChambeau, and it just bounced off him. The ball is coming fast in the NFL, and the competition is extremely, extremely good. I think that Burden is much more of a guy that even if he's not the most polished, you could just get him the football and he's going to make plays, which I think has a much higher chance of at least being okay in the NFL. So I would go Burden. How about you, Mr. Wide receiver expert?
Yeah, I think the way NFL offenses operate today, I think it's definitely benefits Burden. We see guys like Amon Ra, JSN, Lad McConkey, all these guys are having success inside. And I think Burden can be a plug and play guy for multiple teams and kind of continue that trend. And T-Mac, like, I think he has Mike Evans potential, maybe depending on how much film he watches. But those bigger, tall guys like Nico Collins and T. Higgins, they're elite at that height because they have that second gear that they could kick into, and I'm not sure T-Mac has that. But
Yeah,
so I'm going with.
I think the same thing. I just when I hear, well, he's got the contested catch stuff, I think I don't know. That's a hard place to live in the NFL. And Mike Evans was an all-time freak, I think, at that size that we maybe don't even give enough credit to him for that. Who's next on your list?
Yep. So the next, I got Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant.
I think, that's a hard one. I think I'd rather have Kenneth Grant. I think he's a better prospect, and the potential and the upside of him getting after the quarterback is much higher than maybe it's being projected as because he doesn't have huge sack numbers in college. And look, I believe in production going over, but his pressure production is pretty good for somebody that played next to Mason Graham, who I imagine ate up a lot of the pressures there. I just see a freaky dude with his movement that intrigues me more than Walter Nolan, who is very strong and didn't get after the passer maybe quite as much as you would have liked to him to do for the raw skills that he has. So I would go with the dancing bear, Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, I honestly like both of these guys. And Grant, he's massive, and he also like can bring that pressure to the quarterback. So it's hard to even give Nolan a fair shake. But Nolan is just so explosive. Seeing a D tackle get off the ball the way he does is super impressive, and I haven't seen anything like that in a while. And yes, he's raw, but if he can tighten it up and really figure it out, I think he could really get to the quarterback at the next level. And that's kind of where the NFL is headed. They want D tackles who could get after the quarterback, and if he could do it in a blink of an eye, I like that. So I'll take the chance with Nolan, but I'm a fan of both of these guys.
I go back and forth on this because I totally agree with DT's getting after the quarterback as being the most valuable. But I'm also thinking, well, a lot of the discussion was how the NFL was running more last year and is playing more deep zones and things like that. If you have a guy who can completely stuff the middle and then also have the potential to be at least somewhat of an impact. Sid's close personal friend says Grant has no burst. I don't agree with that. I think he does. I think he's got surprising quickness for somebody who is 330. Maybe he doesn't have any burst compared to Walter Nolan, who's 30 pounds lighter than him.
Yeah.
But I think that you don't get mocked this high unless you have some of that. So yeah, I think it's an interesting debate between those two and their playing styles. If I thought Grant had no ability to get after the passer, then I would say, of course, because that's Tyleik Williams. Tyleik Williams has no chance of getting sacks. I'm not taking him in the first round. But with Grant, I do think he's different.
Yep. And for the next one, I have Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland.
I would take Tyler Warren because he's more versatile. But I'm going to tell you the truth about Colston Loveland. Have not seen him, have not watched him. I just don't. If he was standing in this room, I wouldn't know who he was because I haven't looked at tight ends at all for reasons that I mentioned earlier. I mean, they've got Hawkinson locked in. I did see Warren play he's hard to miss. If you watched a single Penn State game, you saw Warren play all over the field. I think Warren's more fun. So I'll go with that. I will go Warren because I think he's really fun.
Yep, I like that choice. I think both are super unique because they aren't traditional tight ends. Loveland is basically just a big receiver, and Warren can really play anywhere. So I think Loveland has the potential to be a good power slot option, but I'm not sold on his physicality and his ability to really be an inline tight end and really block and have a positive impact doing that. So I'm not sure. When I look at Warren, he's just the definition of a football player. So I want that dude on my team. So I'm picking Warren.
Now that's some draft analysts, intern draft analyst Clay right there. Definition of a football player. Beautiful. I like it. But they do move him all over the place.
Yeah, he reminds me. I know Taysom Hill isn't the best football player, but he reminds me of a variant of that. Hill was like major quarterback, but could do everything else, and then Warren's like can do everything else and can line up at quarterback to run around a bit. So he's super fun. At first, when I first watched him, I just thought he was a fun player to watch. But then I saw all the mock drafts and he's a potential top 10 guy and all this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how his career turns out. I think for my next one though, I have two guards. I'm going Tyler Booker and Gray Zabel.
How could I have not seen Loveland catching balls from? Okay, I have seen him, but I haven't looked at him in any way of studying him. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I saw him catching the football, but I don't know. Like if it was any other, if you told me that the tight end was a 4th round draft pick who was catching the ball, I'd be like, okay, I was not looking that closely. But anyway, not the point. Wait, who we got now?
Tyler Booker or Gray Zabel?
Well, this one's hard because I like Zabel a little bit better because I think that Zabel is a really excellent athlete and that he has such a nasty element to his game that I think he fits well with a team that is going to mix in zone running. When you have 2 running backs whose entire history is in zone systems, then you're going to do that. And I think Zabel's a little better fit for that than Booker. But I feel like with all these interior linemen, there's just a lot of debate with it. Like, is Booker not athletic enough, or does that not really matter as much as people say? And Booker is talked about as being super high IQ, like special makeup and personality and that kind of thing. So I go back and forth. I mean, I might take Zabel just because the history of guys with Zabel's athletic profile is just much better than the history of guys who are below 60th percentile and like the relative athletic score and things like that. So it'd be kind of a math thing for me, but if they like Booker better than Zabel, I wouldn't criticize them for it. I think I would just go Zabel.
Yeah, I like Zabel too, and it's like you said, his versatility that he offers, being able to play multiple positions, is just really unique with his agility and his athleticism. So I think he'll really stand out. And Booker just, even past the draft numbers, just watching him play, he just looks so slow and stiff. Like, yeah, he's massive, but I don't know. In certain offenses, he's going to be asked to do a lot of different schemes and complete a lot of different tasks. I don't know if he's going to be able to handle all of that like Zabel will. So
my concern with Tyler Booker, exactly what you said, when I listened to Mike Tice on Nate Tice's show, and Mike Tice, if you don't know, Clay, because you were very young when this happened, was the head coach of the Vikings, offensive line, former tight end. So he knows his stuff, and he was on Nate Tice's show, and he said he just doesn't see the quick explosiveness element, which he thinks that you need in today's game. And I agree with that. I think that with someone like Booker, slow in any way is just not playing these days. When we're talking about Walter Nolan, we're talking about Derek Harmon and Mason Graham and all these guys who are lightning quick on the interior. That's what concerns me about that, is if you're not fast enough, you're going to have a pretty tough time in there. And that's been the case for like a Laken Tomlinson and players like that. Yeah, they're huge, but guys could get by them. And the number one concern I have about Booker is that by PFF run blocking grade, didn't grade that well. It was like a 65. And that is what would concern me, because I think years ago, PFF found that correlation between success was actually higher with run blocking than it was pass blocking for college offensive linemen. And I guess you could see that because it's more of a display of their pure skills. You're often pass blocking for spread systems with screens and quarterback runs and stuff like that, or bootlegs, RPOs. Whereas running, it's like you versus the other guy. So it's a better representation. So I think that I would go Zabel there.
Yep, I agree. So for my next one, I have Will Johnson or Jade Barron.
I would go Barron. And the reason is because, and I saw Will Johnson get a pick six against not the Vikings, the Gophers. Who was it that threw the pick six? One of their quarterbacks. It wasn't Brosmer. Whoever it was before threw a pick six, and Will Johnson took it to the house. I was like, whoa, okay, that guy. Look at him. But when I hear that Will Johnson's had the injury stuff, and then some people are not sure if he gave 110 because he knew he was going to be a high draft pick, that's not what I see from Jade Barron. I also think that the positional flexibility is enormous, and that would be very important to me, is the fact that he can be inside or outside, and you're going to play for Brian Flores. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I like Will Johnson's size, and he could potentially be better on the outside than Barron, but I like Barron too. When you cut the film on, you could tell he's a dog. Like, he just plays with a different level of speed and intensity, and his positional versatility is really unique. And as nickels become more and more important in the league, I think Barron will be able to step into that role and kind of be like a Devon Witherspoon in Seattle. So.
Okay, give me one more, and then I have to go to dinner. And I'm sorry that Vikings fans asked too many great questions, but on Monday night, you and I will be back. I promise more space for you, Clay, on Monday night. We're under unique circumstances here in the back den of my in-laws' house.
It's all good. The fans make the show, and they help run it, so I'm all for that. My last one was Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders.
I would have to go Cam Ward. But the one thing about a Shedeur Sanders that I might throw out there is when you get drafted by the Titans, I just wish you the best of luck. Like, may God be with you, because that is one of the worst, most atrocious, pathetic franchises that exists in pro sports. And if Shedeur Sanders were to get drafted by a good team that could put some stuff around him, then I would go Shedeur Sanders. I mean, I'm going to go with the person who gets the better circumstance around them 100% of the time versus somebody who has a much worse, unless it's a clear, wide gap. But if we're talking about 2 first-round picks, if that's what Sanders is, then I would go with the circumstances. So I would have to know where Shedeur goes. As a pure prospect, I don't think it's that close. I think that Cam Ward is probably much more physically gifted, which is ultimately what's going to give you the best chance to be a good player.
Yeah, so it might be boring or the safe route to go, but it's so hard to predict quarterbacks in the NFL. And I like Cam Ward's talent better, but unless these quarterbacks are really special, which I'm not sure if either of these guys are, their success lies more in the coaching and the team around them. So I'm on board with you. It's kind of just where they go and the culture they end up in, and who takes advantage of it more. So.
Okay, the family is texting me. Time to go, so I gotta scoot here. But this was great. This worked out really well. Thank you, Clay, for your contribution. Again, I promise Monday night we'll get some more Clay's Corner in. But I appreciate you taking the time a little bit earlier today than usual. So we'll see you on Monday night. Thank you, and to everybody who watched and tuned in, asked questions. I really appreciate you. This was a really fun conversation. So thanks for doing it, everybody. And we will talk again very soon. Football